When Gregor Robertson was Vancouver mayor, the price of buying a house increased by 179% in one of the most expensive markets in Canada. Why do you think someone with this track record should oversee the housing file? Is this a signal from you that you don't think housing prices should go down?
You would be very hard-pressed to make that conclusion from everything I've said and what our priorities are. We have a strong view on housing, a very clear policy, a policy developed with a number of members of the team, including with Mr. Robertson.
That was the Prime Minister's answer to a question this week following his cabinet swearing in about whether picking former Vancouver Mayor Gregor Robertson to be housing minister is a sign the government doesn't think housing prices should go down. You heard the Prime Minister there. He said no. Well, about 24 hours later, his housing minister said something different.
Do you think home prices need to go down?
No, I think that we need to deliver more supply, make sure the market is stable. It's a huge part of our economy. We need to be delivering more affordable housing. The government of Canada has not been building affordable housing since the 90s, and we've created a huge shortage across Canada. That's where the big need is right now.
That contradiction made the rounds on social media, and last night it was there. The minister posted a clarification, writing in part, "The question I answered was about reducing the price of a family's current home, which for most Canadians is their most valuable asset. The question wasn't should homes rather be more affordable. Of course they should." So what does the back and forth tell us about how important housing will be in this government's mandate and how cabinet will operate? Our front bench is back. Brian Gallant, Tony Clement, and Nathan Cullen. Nathan, I'll start with you on this because you're in British Columbia. I think the reason that this ended up being like a little bit of a political football is because of the demographics of the vote, in particular the degree to which older Canadians who do own homes and who value that understandably as an asset supported the Liberals, in that younger Canadians may have looked elsewhere. Do you think this ends up being a problem for the government?
You want to be real tight on this messaging. Like there can't be a lot of distance, and I'm sure on policy, there's not a lot of distance between Gregor Robertson and Mr. Carney. In the campaign, Mr. Carney's platforms were quite detailed, and I'm sure that's what's going to be guiding what happens next. And look, we're in the middle of a crisis, so this is very important. I can understand why you wouldn't want to tell, particularly older Canadians, maybe a demographic that overwhelmingly voted Liberal, that as part of pushing more supply into the market, especially in places like Toronto, expensive places like Vancouver, Victoria, where I am today, that your price of your house might go down just as you're looking to sell and move into something smaller, et cetera. But the fact of the math is, Mike Mowat and others said, is that if you put more supply in and you make housing more affordable, it's across the board. It's not lower housing prices for some, but others continue to increase. Generally, it doesn't make any sense, and I can understand why Gregor said what he said, but I think if their plan is their plan and they want to double the rate of housing, BC and other provinces stand at the ready, and let's get at it, and it's going to have an effect on pricing, which is the point. We want it to be more affordable.
It wasn't the only contradiction this week, Brian. You had Minister Robertson saying that, somewhat different than what Prime Minister Carney had said the day before. You also had comments on pipelines that Minister Carney made to me, and then a different set of comments that Minister Guilbeault made. You've, been at the helm of a cabinet. Is that a sign of anything this early on, or is there not much there?
As the sort of head of the government, when I was premier, it's certainly fun to wake up and be told that a minister said something that was contrary to what you said, as you can imagine. But look, I mean, like any group of people, there's obviously diverging opinions. I mean, I don't think we can hide that. But the idea of our Westminster system is a party gets together, especially if you're a part of the cabinet that is forming the leading the government, to essentially agree to agree in public and have those discussions behind the scenes. So it's not surprising to see it, and I think you'll see more of it. What will be more interesting over the coming days and weeks is to see how Prime Minister Carney and his team deal with it. Yeah. Is it something that they'll sort of allow? Is it something that they'll, behind closed doors, talk about and try to rein in a bit? Or is it something that they'll allow in certain files but not in others? So I think that's going to be really a bit of a test of the culture that Carney wants to create within his government. But that's not abnormal, and especially In the case of Robertson, somebody that's a new minister, that certainly doesn't surprise me at all. Guilbeault's not. Guilbeault obviously would have known exactly what he was doing, but I think we obviously know the dynamics of where he stands on some of these issues. So normal for the party and a government to have that happen. Not as normal that it'd be this frequent. What will be interesting? Will they rein it in, and if so, how and when?
Well, to Brian's point, Tony, what was interesting, I think, on the day of the cabinet swearing in was in the initial remarks from the Prime Minister, he made a point of saying, like, that cabinet ministers essentially wouldn't be constrained in the way, and I'm paraphrasing, but this is how I interpret it, in the ways that they had been, let's say, under the previous government, or even maybe even the government before, as you would know better than I would. How hard is it for that to actually be the case in practice?
Well, I mean, here's a pro tip, though. You don't walk out of the swearing in or your very first cabinet meeting in a new ministry and start talking to the media. I'm sorry, with all respect to you.
Don't listen, anybody. Don't listen. Yeah.
It's just like there would be problems, and then PMO has to issue a clarification, or there's a tweet clarification initiated by PMO, I'm sure.
Right.
So why get into that early on? I don't think that's good practice, and I think that the Carney government will realize that in due course.
Do you think, though, it is like inherently challenging to do what he says? He wants to be the case, which is for there essentially to be more autonomy for cabinet ministers, to it not be so controlled by the centre?
Well, I think it always starts off that way.
Right.
Typically, it doesn't end that way, and that's true of either party that's been in federal government. It tightens up over time because you want your cabinet ministers to stay in cabinet, and so therefore the frequency of mistakes in today's world, where social media, it used to be cable news was 24/7. Now it's social media is hypercharged 24/7. So there has to be a degree of discipline there, I would argue.
Nathan, what are your thoughts on that? You've also sat around the cabinet table in the province of BC. Like, is it possible to do what Carney says?
Well, I always agreed with the Premier in every single instance on every single matter, Vashi. So I never had that challenge that you folks are talking about. I think it's both of my friends here have articulated it well. There's a bit of a cost benefit, right? Having Gregor is a very experienced cabinet minister, mayor, and sat in legislature before, Minister Guilbeault as well. You want their intelligence, you want their rigor to issues. You don't want people necessarily freelancing. And I think you mentioned the two issues, housing and pipelines. Both of those are really important issues, right? There's going to be a few where, as Tony talked about, discipline is important. Mr. Carney is also different. He's not a seasoned politician. He's this first-time role doing this. He's done other leadership. But just as Gregor found, a passing question in the hallway, asked a certain way, gives a certain response, and now, as Tony says, you're issuing clarifications, and you're just distracting away from the other things you want to be doing. So good discipline. But I guess I'm one to champion for you, not just for you in the media, but for the public, that we have ministers coming to the mic that have not got the speaking points tattooed on their forearm that are issued by the PMO. I want folks that are bringing their experience and their intelligence, and sometimes maybe a differentiated point of view, but got to be careful of those real big issues, pipelines, housing. There's probably a few others where you just got to know what you're saying and be very clear about it.
Got just under a minute, Brian, last word to you. And you know this too from listening to the cabinet swearing in. Do you think the Prime Minister will be able to execute on the kind of autonomy that he says he would like cabinet ministers to have?
It's tough, and I want to maybe share with viewers, I've been around politics for a while, and I certainly had the privilege of serving, and I can tell you that nobody really is afraid to have debates and internal to your team. People, in fact, do it all the time, and it's important, and it's a very pivotal part in the way that we develop policy and take positions. So that's not the issue, and I think somebody that maybe hasn't been at the heart of politics for too long might say to themselves, well, there's no problem. Well, they can say what they think, and we can have debate and discourse. No issue there. The problem is the media will take that and focus on it. So you have this big announcement that's life-altering for the country, you think in a positive way, and it gets no play because they focus on a discrepancy between a minister and the Prime Minister, and that becomes discouraging.
I blame the media too, Vashi, just for the record.
Yeah, it's all my fault. I understand. Brian just likes to blame me for everything. I get it. Thanks, guys. Great discussion. I really appreciate it. Our front bench, Brian Gallant, Nathan Cullen, and Tony Clement.